Okie dokes. I don't know Kazito, but maybe that's great. Thanks, Janine. So if we all let's just put our names and who we belong to in the chat box. Okay, whoops. Let's get rid of that. Okay. Maybe we should just go for it. So hello, everyone. So I am leading today, and we're going to be talking and thinking about digital access. I think all of us have had issues with. I know we've been struggling for very long to sort of master this one, and at the moment, our best bet is still WhatsApp occasionally. But on the other hand, we do have one of the guys in Zimbabwe has recently been by an American church, I think it is, and they paid for a huge solar panel, a generator. They paid for the cable put in by the local council, and I think they're paying about $250 a month for data. So they are all set up, but it has been quite an expensive journey, and they've got like a little hub in Chinhoyi, which is a local, it's a rural area in Zimbabwe. So I had spoken to someone called Julian Rosser, who works for Hub Simru, I hope that's how you say it, who's absolutely so knowledgeable. He's so fantastic in what he does, and also his knowledge of digital access and contacting or accessing digital thing in Africa. And unfortunately, well, he was going to come today, but unfortunately he's got COVID. So what we've done is he's given me permission to use part of a video that it was part of a webinar that he did about 2 months ago. So I thought we could do is watch the first bit. It's really informative. He does a little bit of talking, and then we could. Then there's a case study. That will take about 30 minutes if we work through that, and then a very, very useful information. Then we can stop, because he then goes on to barriers. And before he talks about the barriers that he's encountered, we could maybe, how many are there? Maybe break into a couple of breakout rooms and just talk about the barriers that we've accessed, and then come back and feedback. Then we can listen to him for a couple of more months. And I think he talks after that about technology and inequality, also really interesting, just for 5 minutes. And then at the end, maybe think about risks involved, and also funding, if anyone's been successful in their attempts to provide digital access to partners in Africa. Is there anyone here not from Africa, who's working in a country not Africa? I don't know, Kazito, where you work. Do you know Kazito? Oh, okay. I work in Rwanda.
Yes, Kazito
in Rwanda.
Rwanda.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean Africa.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I don't think there's anyone not working into Africa. I think we're all into Africa. Okay, great. So I'm going to take a minute just to get up the share. Any questions or comments to start with? Ruth, I'm not 100% sure who I belong to today. Okay. Right, let's get this share screen. Oh, I actually did do a PowerPoint. Let me go on to that. Can you see that? I actually did do an agenda. So video clip with Julian, the basics of getting online, case study from a guy called Howard. I couldn't catch his surname. He is in Wales, but he works with Gioconda Solar Systems in Zambia. and internet access in Africa from Julian. Again, really interesting statistics. Then breakout rooms, then back to Julian on the video, and then our final comments. So, okay, so let's stop that one and go to the video. Right, so I've started it just a little bit into his talk, missing out the first, hang on, sorry. I didn't click this thing here, sorry, hang on a sec.
First is just to, or actually, I don't know, is there anything interesting in the chat box? Let's have a look at the chat box. Brilliant.
First poll, Julian.
Oh, yes, that's a very good idea, Kath. Wonderful. Brilliant. So Howard's in the chat box and has introduced himself. It would be really good to see lots of information in there from everybody who's coming along today to see what it is that you're here for, what it is that you think you'd like to gain from the event. And we will keep an eye on the chat box as well as the workshop is going on to make sure that if there are topics that haven't been covered or that we're not going to cover, that we can either come to them at the end and maybe get some information that way, or we can follow up in some other ways. Because this project is being run for a year. It's been funded by the Waterloo Foundation to support small organisations and medium organisations within the Wales Africa community to make better use of digital tools. So not seeing any of that information in the chat box. Nobody's giving me any of those things about who they are, where they're from, or what they want. Oh, wonderful. We've got something from Alison. Fantastic. Brilliant. I can see things filling up there now. So I just needed to goad you a lot. That's clearly the way forward. Right. So I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the basics of getting online and getting communities online. There are many communities in Africa who are benefiting a lot from getting online. People are able to use the internet for education, for economic empowerment, for cultural, for social reasons. And clearly the internet around the world has revolutionized the way that many people live. So the very, very basic start for what you need, if you need to get a community online, then you need to have a device. That could be a computer, it could be a phone, it could be all sorts of things. But essentially you need a device which is capable of accessing the internet and getting that information there. That device will need to be running some software. You will need to get that device online. If it's a telephone, then it will have all these things embedded. But if it's not, you'll probably need a modem, or you'll need a router to get the information from the internet into your device and get it onto other devices. The other thing that you need is internet service provider. Unfortunately, these things are still not free. So you'll need to have a financial relationship with a company that can provide you with access to the internet. And you will need power. And we found that this is a major issue in many parts of Africa, where actually there is not reliable electricity, and that it's not enough just to put in access to the internet, but to put in devices, that it's very important that people have got power in order to use those devices. And then finally, on this list of the basics, you'll need the ability to use these things. And so what I'd say is that it's very important, if you're planning any project, to try to get a group of people online, to get them to benefit from the advantages of the internet. Then you don't want to start with a project in your head. You don't want to start already having worked out what sort of tools you're going to employ. What you need to do very much is start with the user, start with the people who you hope will benefit from this project. And when I say start with the user, you need to consider where they are. You need to consider very much what abilities they already have, what resources that they have access to where they are, and you need to work with those people to talk about what it is that they need and what it is that they say they need support with. Understanding the context and the people that you're working with will be able to help you to understand the context of where they're living, and they will have better intelligence than you will about how people locally are accessing the internet in the areas that they're living in. You need to consider, is there a cable internet? Is there a really good signal available? Is there a decent telephone signal available in the community that you want to work with? And is there power available? And then the other thing that that I found in talking to a lot of groups who are running these sorts of projects in Wales or from Wales is that what they found is that these things are enhanced massively when they work with local experts within the African communities that they're working with. So are there local teachers, are there traders, are there other experts who can support the work that you're doing? We've seen particularly that if organizations can develop good long-term relationships with teachers or with shops even, and providers of these technologies, then they have got somebody on the ground who can help to deal with any problems and deal with any situations as they arise. Right, so what I'd like to do now is go on to our first case study, and I'd like to introduce Howard. If I can find Howard, if I can stop screen sharing, wonderful. As somebody who's dealt with a lot of these issues, who's worked with the community to find out what they want, and has worked with others within the area to provide expertise, is Howard from Giaconda Solar Schools. Howard, I'd like you to kick off, please, and start telling us a little bit about your projects and what you've done.
Yeah. The first thing I'd like to say is that all the stuff I'm going to talk about, I've got it as notes, and I'm going to pass that on to Julian at the end so he can distribute it and you can have a read through, because I know what it's like listening to someone. It can be confusing. Well, we started in Zambia in 2014, which is a long time ago, and through hundreds of mistakes, we've reached today where we think we know a little bit about what we're doing. But even on the last visit we had this year, a few weeks ago, I realized that I still don't know enough. So first thing I'll say is, don't be put off by not knowing things. It's incredibly easy to find people in the area you're looking at, the country you're looking at, who can help with pretty much anything. And we made a point over the years of coming together with several people. The most important for us was the communities, obviously, that we're working with. The DEBS, the Department of Education Board Secretary of the area we are working in, Siafonga, which is in Southern Province, Zambia. We weren't looking in the town, we were working in the rural areas. And also Muhunya Solar, which is a solar panel company, a solar company that produce all sorts of things. They're based in Lusaka. And we went around several organizations relating to solar equipment before we landed with Muhunya Solar. And the reason why we landed with them is because they were helpful. They didn't want just to have the work we were doing. They were interested in what we were doing. They were surprised that someone was caring enough to want to spend their time helping other people. And they generally gave us the impression that they were nice people to work with. So our primary liaison was with the Department of Education Board Secretary for Siafonga, and she was extremely helpful in helping us to identify what it is we could contribute to. And in Siafonga, there's about 40 schools, and of those, something like 36, somewhere around there, didn't have any solar power. And when I first went there, I went there as part of Swansea University project. and I brought along a solar panel and a computer and some LED lights. Because I wasn't aware of the desperate need in these countries to into this area to improve education through the basics that we take for granted here. So the first schools we visited and put some solar panels in were grateful, very grateful, but what we put in was pretty hopeless, really. It was enough power to light a small office and to run a Raspberry Pi computer. That's a very small computer, which is very low in energy consumption. And well, looking back on it, I'm almost ashamed of what we were doing, because we didn't really have a clue. But after 2 visits there, talking to a group called the Siavonga Nutrition Group, and to the Debs and to Mhunya Solar, we started to put together what we might need to provide the school with a reasonable amount of resources. So what I'd like to do now is just quickly talk you through one of our last projects that we were working at Siamwinga School. It's again in Southern Province. It's off the road, but it's not too far off the road to make it inaccessible. We chose this school with the help of Debs because when it had no electrical power, we made a point of working with schools without any of these resources. It had a reasonably large school population, so we could help more people. That was the thought on that. It was reasonably accessible, as I say, with the lands. We borrowed the Debs Lands cruiser to get there, and it wasn't much of a problem. It was also equidistant from several other schools in the area, and we thought that if we were going to put some resources in this school, it would be useful if those resources could be used by other schools as well. One of the problems we always have is thinking, well, what do I do? Do I put a small amount of resources in a lot of schools, or a large amount of resources in one school? That's really a heartbreaking decision to make. But we chose Siamwinga because of its location and the other things I mentioned. And we also thought, well, if we're going to put something decent into this school, something which I would consider the minimum requirement, which is more than what we have been putting in, then we need to think about it very carefully. And the first thing we did, as you can see in the notes later, is what would we like to put in there? And we decided that on a start, we would put in lighting throughout the school. It's only it's a small traditional Zambian block school, which has 3 classrooms, head teacher's office, a deputy head teacher's office, and a small office and store for the staff. So that was the school we were working on. We thought we couldn't afford a lot. We decided we would like to put in some computer equipment, and we also decided we'd like it to be able to communicate to the outside world through the use of the internet. That wasn't a primary consideration for us, because we also took into this school, and we've taken it into all the schools in Southern Siavonga, the Raspberry Pi computer, which acts as a hotspot. You can connect to it just like you connect to the internet. It's not the internet, so you don't get things like WhatsApp and email and Zoom. That doesn't come into it. But you can access huge, literally huge resources on a small Raspberry Pi computer. There are several thousand videos on there which are related to maths and science education. There are literally hundreds of books in the local languages, Bembe, Chitonga, and Nyanja, that can be put up onto a screen so that you can have what we in the UK call an hour of literacy, where you can take kids through reading. So we decided that we've always decided that is preferable to access to the internet for all sorts of weird reasons, not for professional development of teachers, not for communication. It just doesn't work for that. So, you know, the internet is good for that. But what we've been putting in is good for the kids in the school. So we decided to put a Raspberry Pi computer with the resources in there. And then we thought we would try and put as many Raspberry Pi computers, set up traditional computers, just like you would use in an office, into the schools, into this school. And we thought we could probably accommodate 5 computers and 3 laptops. So that was our focus. We want 5 computers, 3 laptops, light the school, projector, not a projector, sorry, a TV, because we found TVs were more useful than projectors. And we tried to network these computers so that they could be a more useful resource, but we'll come to that perhaps in a minute. So having decided what we were going to do, and making a note of the fact we were not thinking of putting a fridge in, we were not thinking of putting a freezer in. These things you have to think about because they impact heavily on the amount of energy you want. So you have to know the amount of energy that you're going to be required to collect from the sun. So we sat down and worked out what the energy requirements for each device would be. And that comes, the energy requirement for a device is measured in watts. And if you're going to have a computer that takes 3 watts of power on for 10 hours, that's 30 watt hours. That's the amount of electricity that it's going to use, and you have to accommodate that. We use batteries to help store surplus energy during the day. We put solar panels on the roof, and the solar panels we use now are over 300 watt. So I've seen lots of schools where, lots of situations where people have gone in, because they're easy and they're relatively cheap, they put 100 watt panels on the school roof, and they're not really very good. 100 watt panel never reaches 100 watt. That's the same as a 300 watt panel never reaches 300 watts. But the bigger the panel, the less space it takes up per watt, and the more likely you are to get a reasonable power consumption out of it. So we decided to match the power that we knew we were going to use with the power that we could collect using solar panels. And having done that, then we needed to know, well, what's the cost of this? We had a rough idea because we've been putting lots of solar panels in. And as a general rule of thumb, to put a set of solar panels in a school, 4 or more, which is a reasonable amount of electricity, you're going to need to spend in the region of £5,000. You won't get much change. The computers themselves are really important. The government in Zambia have recently given schools ordinary PCs. They're old PCs, they've been refurbished and they've put them into schools. And in our last visit, a few weeks ago, I must have visited about 10 schools, and every one of them had these PCs standing on the side doing nothing. And the reason for that is they just don't have the energy to keep them going. And with that, and I predict this, that schools that do use these old computers will soon find their solar systems, if they have them, absolutely defunct. Lead acid batteries are what you use with solar stuff. And unfortunately, one of the big problems with lead acid batteries, and you'll know if you've got a car, if you drain the battery, then over a period of probably less than a year, it'll become dead. And I know I've seen that happen on so many places. So it's really critical when you put any of this solar stuff in to make sure that the local community understand the cost of this resource in terms of time and maintenance. Solar panels are very susceptible to dust. If you don't wash them regularly, just a bucket of cold water and a cloth, not during the daytime when the sun is hot, but during the twilight, during the early morning, you can get up on top of the roof if they're on the roof. A lot easier if they're on the ground, but not many people do that because it's too easy to nick them, steal them, I mean. So if you go up on the roof with a damp cloth and you wash the panels when there's dust on them, you're not going to have very many problems. Similarly with the battery, if you look after the battery and you don't drain it, you won't have many problems. We found really useful for the battery, so you don't have to make those. Really useful for the battery is to have a very simple fuel gauge, if you like, which can tell you what the state of the battery is. And the one we use is one from Midnight Solar. It's very expensive. It costs about $60 to $80, which the only thing is, why spend that much on a fuel gauge? Well, it's a very good fuel gauge, and it's very simple. It's got a series of red, amber, and green LEDs, and you can see very easily. You don't have to look at numbers. You don't have to look at percentages. You don't have to look at amps. You can see red, amber, and green. If it's green, everything's fine. If it's amber, you've got to stop what you're doing and think where the energy is going, because it's losing energy. If it's red, don't touch it for at least a week and hope it'll recover. But, you know, once it's gone into the red, once it's used half its capacity, not, you know, half a battery's capacity is gone, it starts to deteriorate. So it's really, really important to understand that yourselves and to understand that the others who you're working with understand that as well. So cleaning the solar panels, maintaining or checking the battery is really important.
You've got a couple of minutes, Howard.
Okay. The last thing I will say then, all this stuff is in the notes. It'll be all right. When it comes to connecting to the internet, most in rural areas, most of the routers that you buy in town, in Lusaka, whether it's for MTN, Zamtel, or so on, they're not good enough to pick up remote signals. So you can give people a router and it's still not very good. So what you need is a good router. And in the notes, I've made a note of what I think a good router is. And this is after giving lots of different routers to lots of different schools and finding out which are the best ones. You need a good router, and you also need a good antenna. A good router will cost you over £100, and a good antenna will cost you over £100. So although that is a huge outlay, £200, it's essential in a rural area where you want to get a good signal that you can use Zoom or WhatsApp and all those things. One final thing I'll say about that: be careful if you connect a school to the internet. Make sure that you can keep the school safe. Both adults and children are very vulnerable to all sorts of, I'll use the word crap, on the internet. It is dangerous to set up an internet connection. It is very easy for a technical person to set up something that will filter all that stuff out. And in fact, you know, you don't have to look for a real expert. Once it's set up, all you need is a good administrator in the school, someone that's good at IT, and all he'll do is check that no one messes about with it. Okay, is that...
Oh, right. I thought just before we go on, I found that so interesting. He was so practical and suggested things that I've never even thought about, like wound the solar panel with a damp cloth. I mean, I would never even think of that. So I think maybe before we go on, if anybody could just feedback or comment on what Howard said. Let's just have a look here. I think he would be willing to share his notes. I'll go back to Julian after this, and I'm sure it will be fine because Julian's he's very open to that. He says what's out there is for all of us to learn. Yeah, how to guide. Okay. Lorna says she missed the safeguarding point. Janine, do you just want to go over that? I also thought that is so important, that last point about safeguarding.
Yeah, I suppose what I was thinking of is, and I have to be 100% honest, and I don't know if that's a step we've taken with our Windows on the World project, tablets we provided, but making sure that there is a restriction to the content and some filters so that you're not creating a situation where school-age children can access anything on the internet. I think from a safeguarding perspective, and in order for us to comply with it, I'm sure we have very robust safeguarding policies, and we do as well, but also we missed that critical step. So I think that's just, I really liked, just to echo what you said, the practicality of what you were talking about, and that was sort of what I was talking about in terms of safety.
Okay, thanks, Janine. Is there anyone else who wants to just comment on what Howard said? Any thoughts or?
Yeah, I thought it was really, really good, really practical, as you say. The wiping of the panels, checking the battery. I wasn't aware about these batteries if they wear down.
I know.
So things like that, so helpful. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, I found that, and I also enjoyed the way he did his journey, because I think we've made that mistake exactly where we've provided stuff for people in Zimbabwe, and it hasn't lasted, or it's been thought, that old thought that just let's get rid of all the stuff in our house, the missionaries, and it hasn't worked. It's not. I don't think it's false economy to send or to buy old stuff. So I thought a very good point. What was the other thing he said? I also found it quite interesting. He in the figures he gave us, sort of roughly £5,000 for the panels, £100. That was the other thing I'd never thought about. A fuel gauge. I've never even heard of that, but I thought that was also really, really interesting. Okay, so if there's no more questions or comments, we can move on. There's a short, it's about 5 minutes, where Julian goes over some really interesting statistics. And I'm going to stop it again because he then goes into barriers, and we can, before we hear from him, we can just divide into, I think, maybe 2 groups and some of our barriers that we face. So I'm going to go back. Is the sound and everything okay? It's all right. Okay. Go back. Sorry, my finger moves too fast. I'm going to move it along a little bit.
So
back and mop up any issues that we haven't dealt with. So what is that? I'll carry on with a little bit more presentation, and then we will have another case study quite soon. So what I'm going to talk about generally, if I can get that to work, beautiful, is kind of background to internet access in Africa, and one of the challenges with all of these things of trying to do workshops and information which is talking about Africa is that Africa is a very large and very diverse continent with an awful lot of things going on, and nowhere so much, I suppose, as in internet access. Indeed, there are a number of countries in Africa that have got far better levels of telephone coverage than the UK does. And when you look at the percentages of people in Africa who've got some internet access, then you can see from this that it's massively wide-ranging, and from Kenya, where they've got very significant levels of the population is covered and has got some access at 85%, down to Eritrea, where the levels of access are around 7%. So a massively diverse scene and situation there. And what we have found from research work that we've done with Wales for Africa organisations and their partners was that the barriers that they talked about to getting online in Africa include the availability of data. Is there a signal where they are, and can you become attached to it? Then the cost of data, and even if you can get data.
Sorry, I was reading my other notes, and you started on the barriers. So maybe now what we can do is if you give me a minute, we can divide into 2 groups, or do you think that's too big? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12, 6, that's all right. And then for about 10 minutes, let's just talk about barriers that we face, and then we can come back and share those and then move on. Okay.
You got the breakout rooms, or do you want me to?
Sorry, Claire?
So did you want me to do the breakout rooms, or do you have?
No.
You got it?
Okay, I'm going to press sorry, Claire.
Well, that's great.
I've done it.
Go for it. Great.
I've done it. So I'm going to open now. Okay, it's 1, 2, 3. I think that's everyone. I think a couple have had to leave. So if we just feedback on what we said. So from Claire and Julian's group, is there someone who'd like to share for you what you felt the barriers were, or Janine's epic links?
We did that. Janine was just passing down some information on both of those links, which were great resources to check out.
We also had sun actually being a problem, and that we needed to recognize that perhaps for three months of the year, we won't be fully functional. Security was a big thing, in that batteries are highly sought after and are being stolen.
Yes.
And that then leads to sort of considerations for insurance and the costs associated with that. Maintenance and upkeep of the equipment, and whether there are local skills available for that was an important part. It was also recognised that some people who might have those skills could be quite transient in that they might go and get jobs in other places because they are skilled people. So your resources won't always be there. And it was also, again, highlighted that we need to make sure there's a lot of local ownership and local responsibility.
Oh, that's excellent. I think all those points, I know that thing of security and equipment being stolen is a very, very big thing. So that brings up the added cost really of guarding the equipment, taking care of it. Okay, thank you. And Harriet, you were going to share for us.
Yes, we discussed sort of how are we currently communicating with people we work with, teachers and so forth. And we were talking about how WhatsApp has really grown in popularity and has become more people have access to it, but there's still a divide, and there's still a good chunk of people that people in the groups in Uganda and also people in Kenya and in Zimbabwe have all found the same thing, that there's a big chunk of people that don't have access to WhatsApp and so miss out. And then we talked of the cost of data, that even if you have a phone with WhatsApp on, it's very expensive often to buy the data, so you're not constantly able to communicate or be in touch. Then we talked, we were a little bit surprised about the 85% figure for Kenya, because my experience and my colleagues, Morris, is that certainly where we work in a rural area, that's not the case at all. And so we were wondering whether maybe that statistic is perhaps availability of internet rather than people who actually access it. You know, like, for example, there might be a cyber nearby where they can go and print something out if need be, but they don't have daily access themselves on a personal device. That's certainly been our experience. And then obviously the power issue, even if somebody has power access and electricity, that it goes on and off all the time, and that makes things very difficult. And that seemed to be across the 3 countries, Uganda, Zimbabwe and Kenya, that were all represented in our group. Have I missed anything? I hope not.
No, I think the only point that was really interesting was, maybe Lorna can share it, was it Lorna was saying about
about hubs.
Primary schools where the hubs, and also in the primary schools where they have now online registration. I thought that was jolly interesting. Do you want to just comment?
Oh yeah, I was talking about which are not set up yet, but I think it was Shaz that mentioned about the online, about the uploading information every day. Yes. Yeah. So yes, we do that. I mean, that's kind of our ideal situation, that we will have those hubs set up that we can then connect to the main hub at our resource centre. And yes, we were lucky to be able to get some funding to do that, and we also had some people project managing the thing to get us started for free, so that was good as well. Yeah, but we were also talking about, yes, you might have this nice facility there. We as a team use it, so it would never be defunct. And also it's on the site of a school, so again, people there can easily use it. But we were also talking about making that available to others. You know, things like just getting people there. It could be an issue of time, but it's more an issue of the cost of the transport, how that can be prohibitive as well, and stop people getting there to make the most of that facility.
Yeah, so we sort of went round in circles really, and it seems like at the moment, I don't know if anyone else has got major solutions, but it seems like the most effective way of communicating and digital access is still WhatsApp, because it's wonderful to have hubs, and even though we aim at that, that brings up various challenges which we don't have solutions for. So I know we've got some time left. I was going to go back to Julian, but actually while we're talking, I wondered, because it's a small group, just informally, what do we think the solutions are to these barriers? I mean, the key one is the cost of data, power supply, security. There's quite a lot of barriers, quite a lot of issues, maintenance, training. What are the solutions?
In terms of power, we'd like to have solar everywhere, but obviously that's a big cost as well. And clearly that guy was talking about it. I didn't know about sort of keeping the panels clean as well. I hadn't thought about that. It's kind of common sense, but I hadn't thought about it. In terms of cost of data, I think just more competition's needed, really.
I also think there must be deals to be done with Vodacom and all those other people to get data packages for schools as part of their corporate social responsibility.
I think going back to what Howard said, he said draw on and draw in as much as possible local partners. So in Zimbabwe, I know there's a couple of solar providers that possibly we could go and speak to, and if we could get them to come on board, I think that would be helpful, both for them to maybe to give donations or work with us or help us both in training and also providing. So that was a possible solution, which Howard seems to have overcome. Any other solutions that you see? Janine, you look like you're leaning forward.
We'll start with the barrier, because we've sort of found a solution that's linked to what you're saying. Is we have a trusted solar provider in Kenya that we work with, who has been really, really helpful in terms of guiding us through and helping us to not pay more than what we need, really think through the moment what you're proposing requires this amount of time. But if you did it slightly differently, you're going to drastically reduce the cost of your system. So just encouraging us to think like that. And actually, we've been having ongoing problems with the community, the solar panels, the solar power that we've installed within a community we're working with in Uganda. I actually took the technician from our Kenya partner with me to Uganda when I was there last time, and asked him to do a report, really a sort of a technical analysis of what we've got. And the biggest problem was that we'd been supplied by inferior equipment, because the person responsible for the project in country didn't have the knowledge himself to be able to really interrogate the information he was being given and to procure that equipment. So a solution that we've put in place is that we're going to ask our sort of technical go-to person in Kenya to almost act as an advisory capacity for other projects, because you need the person who, none of us know what we do. If we don't know what we don't know, and poor Raymond in that situation didn't know what he didn't know, but quite a lot of money is being put into something that's not fit for purpose, that we're going to have to work with them to remedy. And I think the solution is getting a bit of expertise at the beginning. There were a couple of companies mentioned in the presentation, one of them Midnight Solar, I think. So maybe there could be, and it might be something that, this group could, or the SIDCN group more generally, kind of crowdsource, but, who are those trusted people in different localities, and particularly if we could get local partners to tell us, who are the good suppliers and providers. It almost acts as a, and obviously all disclaimers involved and everyone to do their own due diligence, but that might be a starting point to make sure that we don't get inferior products or poor installation. The other big learning we've had as well is about linked to the same project. When things weren't working, unfortunately, the project team went and got a local electrician to look at it, investigate it, and then do some remedial work, in turn voiding the warranty that we had with the original supplier. So we no longer had any fallback to them. So the other big lesson that we've learned is, as part of the initiation of any solar projects like that, is definitely about making sure that there's a communication process back to us, and that we help and support that local organisation to hold their suppliers to account when they've not had what they paid for.
I think those are excellent points. I really, very, very good to think about when you're working with something and then you don't use their technical team, the whole warranty gets voided. Didn't think of that.
Can I ask a question, Janine? Have you had contact with Global Teacher? Because I know they were on this forum a while back, but I don't know if any from their staff, because I think
just yesterday actually. Okay. So Chris was on a call. I was like a different trusts Meet the Finger event this week or earlier this week. So we kind of set up a call yesterday on the back of it. I mean, my understanding is at this point in time, they don't have any within their Lumi system. They don't have any content that would be appropriate to Kenya, because they rely on sort of, for it to be localized and, relevant to the curriculum. But it's something that they're exploring. So we've just agreed to stand up at this point. And I think he said, at the moment I couldn't see sort of what a pricing structure might look like if we were to purchase the projectors, the pods, for the different things. He said it's something they're working on with their website. So I think they may be still in early stages themselves. Yeah.
Thank you. Because I'm aware, particularly in Kenya, there are lots of things a bit like that, lots that are coming out of like West Coast of America, where they're really wanting to invest in tech. In particularly, I think people go to Kenya because it's easy to get to Nairobi. But from what I've seen, it's very hard for small organizations like all the ones represented here to access that kind of stuff, because they tend to work with, you know, the really big, like the UK government or US government or whatever, rather than us little people.
I mean, I wonder if there's something in the momentum SIDCN as a collective that might be an opportunity to engage. Someone within my network who's involved in another initiative working and was offered to give sort of broker an introduction to me, for me to the, I apologize, but to the N50 project. I don't know if you've heard of it. But that is, again, like a collective coming from sort of based out of San Jose, I think it is, and led by Intel and lots of the other sort of big tech firms. But N50 stands for the next 50%, because globally 50% of the people don't have digital access. But I was a little bit stumped in terms of, I was like, great, I'd love the introduction, but I'm also not sure how little old us work with big old you, but maybe there could be something for the broader network where that could actually add a lot of value to both sides, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a good suggestion. Claire, I don't know how we could sort of take that forward, but so for example, if in Zambia or Uganda or Kenya, there already are people who've had success working with local partners, if we could share that information. So I don't know if we could just put a little comment up and ask for comments on that. What do you think? How could we garner more information on that?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think probably the best way to do it, because it wouldn't just be us in this group, it would probably be the wider network, is somebody creating a spreadsheet on the main drive of SIDCN and then putting a post up on the chat or the group, and just say fill in your people, obviously with a big asterisk of you do your own due diligence. That these are somebody I've worked with or
yeah, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Does somebody want to take the lead on putting that spreadsheet together, or?
I can do it. I don't have all the contacts and the sort of your know-how, but I can do that if you like.
I'm happy to take a stab at it and post it if that's easier.
Sorry, Claire, you're breaking up a little bit.
Sorry. I'm happy to put it together if you like.
Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. I'll put it on my list.
That'll be good. Right. I think I don't think I'll actually go back to the video. Just we've already touched on some of the risks. I think the biggest risk is the exposure to the internet when young people and teachers, when they don't have a clue. And so what could be a possible solution to that? How could we manage that? Just blocks or...
Sorry, say that again, Heather. Missed the question, sorry.
Oh, okay. One of the biggest risks, if we're thinking about the risks, I think one of the biggest risks is the exposure, it's safeguarding, it's vulnerability of both the young people and the teachers. Because I think when they're inexperienced, they don't know, you don't know. And then, so my question was, how can we encourage safeguarding? What can we do to encourage that safeguarding?
Well, we actually did have a session on sort of cybersecurity with a bunch of people from each school because of, with the idea that we are going to set up the hubs, but also the fact that we already have one, and the fact that like by encouraging the access to the internet and everything and people learning online, that opened up all kinds of risks. So it started off, it was supposed to be more of a, I suppose, guidance on safeguarding the children online, but it sort of turned into something wider where we were also advising them about all kinds of other things like, people forging bank cards and how they can, use of mobile phones, that kind of thing. So we did a really wide session on it in the end. It did turn out to be very popular, and there was so much stuff that they didn't know. So they did ask for follow-up on that. We haven't yet done that though, a time thing as usual. So,
Did you put that together? Who put that together?
One of my colleagues did. So he's the manager of that resource centre, and he did put that together. I was just trying to think where he got all of his information from. I think he spent some time doing a bit of research, and I'm trying to think if he put it into a PowerPoint or not. I'll ask him.
Do you think he might share it with us? I mean, that sounds fantastic. We did a very basic one, but it didn't go as far as the risks of forging bank cards, etc. So that sounds.
It was all kinds of stuff he ended up talking about. I mean, a lot of it was sort of anecdotal and personal stories, and then actually we did find that a lot of people were then sharing examples of how they'd been conned in one way or another, or people had been sort of impersonating people, contacting them on their mobile phones. All kinds of stuff was coming up. So it is a bit of a wide-ranging thing. So a lot of it was sort of storytelling, but I'll see what he's got and send it to you if it's
that would be brilliant.
Substantial and worth sharing. Yeah.
Okay. I think the other huge risk is that risk of stuff getting stolen. So not safeguarding. Okay, yeah. And really there's more cost in trying to protect that stuff and guard it. I think the last thing that was on the agenda was where to get funding. I know we haven't been very successful in that so far. Someone else has provided funding for our one guy, but any suggestions? Anybody been successful? I think Lorna, you said you've been successful.
Yes, and I'm trying to remember. So some of the funding came from a family foundation related to the guy that was our kind of our IT project manager, the group that was doing the pro bono support. So that's not so helpful. But I did also get a grant for we put some cabling in for a children's home that we work with to get them connected as well. I got that from Brian Murter. Charitable, is it Charitable Trust or Charitable Foundation? I think Charitable Trust. And they do support all kinds of projects with small charities. And also one that I did apply for, but it was a year or so back and I was unsuccessful, was Fat Beehive. I don't know if people
Oh, right, yes, I've seen them.
They were very specific IT support.
I was just going to say, their criteria is very, very specific.
It was.
I can't remember what it was. I
put something in, but I failed.
Yeah.
We tried to them as well and failed as well.
Must have had a lot of requests.
Sorry, Lorna, was the other one you said Brian Murter?
Yeah.
Brian Murter.
I should put it in the chat.
We don't have a funder as such, but we've found that these sorts of projects really capture the imagination of our community fundraisers. So we've just had someone organising what he called the Bike to Hike Challenge, and we set him the target of fundraising for one window on world, and they smashed it, and they've now raised enough funds to do 2 of them. So, and that was also jointly fundraising. His wife's a big supporter of their local riding for the disabled. So in total, I think they raised over £80,000 split between 2 organisations. So if you do sort of any community fundraising or fundraising appeals and campaigns, it can be quite an attractive position, I think, to people.
And anyone else that's had success? Right. Okay.
Okay. Maybe, but I have a suggestion here. Maybe Julian talked of approaching these companies in terms of their corporate social responsibility. Some of these internet service providers companies, we can approach them, schools can approach them and ask for help. For example, they can maybe install some of the devices in our school so that they can be able, students can be able to use them.
So you're saying it's, I couldn't quite hear, approach local internet providers.
Yeah. Like in Kenya, we have Safaricom, which is leading. I think we can still approach the companies and ask them for help in case they can be able to install these devices in our schools. Then at least we can still help.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's a very good idea. Right. Okay, thanks, Lorna. I've just remembered Renu investigating.
Yeah, so somebody, again, it was this IT group that one of the project manager locally here in Uganda, somebody put her onto them. So she's the one that's had the contact with them so far, and I don't know enough about them, but they're supposed to be offering a cheaper alternative to, so the data would be cheaper, in other words, to internet access. So we were going to go with, you know, one of the big internet providers, MTN, for this connection that I was just talking about with the children's home. But now we're trying to investigate whether or not Renu can do something else for us. But as I say, I haven't looked properly into whether they're more widespread than Uganda. I think it might be just Uganda.
Okay.
So we're waiting for them to do a site visit. They're being a bit elusive at the moment, so I don't know how much use they are going to be. So yes, I can't endorse them at the moment, but just I remembered the name. I thought I'd mention it. Okay.
I've never heard of them, but that's.
It might be just judging by the U at the end. It could easily just be Uganda.
Uganda. Okay.
Yeah. But I'll check.
And Safaricom Foundation. Okay, that's great. Right. Well, I think that's it. Unless anybody wants to add some more comments or ideas. I think we covered quite a lot today. Certainly lots to think about. Julian is very willing, once he's recovered, to speak to us more and to actually contact more of the more people that he knows. I think there's one in Zimbabwe. I think there were two in Zimbabwe, to do more case studies of people who have successfully, like Howard, they've actually already got something on the ground up and running. So I don't know if you would like me to follow up. Would you like to hear more from him, or is that enough? What do you think?
It'd be great if he's willing to come and speak. But more the merrier.
Yes. Would you like me? I mean, he said he would be available for our next session. So would you like me to contact him for that, or do you want to wait a bit? What should we do? I think he's got even more to share with us. Like the one area that he went through was the digital divide and the differences between gender, and I can't quite remember, it was all technical, and then also how to when you're thinking about input, establishing a whole thing, it went in one ear and out the other because it was all very technical, but it might be useful for others. So he's very knowledgeable. So should I contact him for the next time, or do you want to go on a different theme? Yeah. What do the others think?
Power of the group. If we were looking at the next one, it would be probably around the 26th of October. If he would be able to make, that's about 6 weeks from now. Maybe we see if, I mean, that's a pretty good lead. So if we can utilize him on the 26th of October, then we're kind of checked ourselves off, which would be great.
Okay. So I'll see provisionally if he's available, and then we could work on that for next time.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, kind of either I guess the Wednesday before or the Wednesday after would also work. So within 3 weeks, that would give us that.
Okay, 26. That's fantastic. And then maybe I was just thinking maybe for homework. I know I started looking again through Bond for funding. For funders for this, but I didn't get very far. But maybe if we pooled our ideas and our resources, that would be a useful exercise. And we could put that on Slack. We don't seem to use Slack a very lot, but maybe we could just add our ideas if we have any more.
Yeah,
okay.
Worth a try.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, for Heather,
okay.
for hosting today, finding all the resources. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, enjoy your day in London and have a nice day, everybody. I'm going to save the chat here before we... Okay. All right, then. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll send out notes and this recording as soon as it gets finished.
Okay.
All
right, then. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.